every single week, folks, I have a very special guest. And this week is no different. This is Miles Lewis, aka Smiles Lewis. Smiles, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Dan.
Yes. And folks, this is a truth wanted episode right here. This is like we're getting into some stuff that I've wanted to talk about for a while on this show. You know, I like to advertise this show as more than just the atheist show, right? This isn't just an atheist show. This is a show where we're talking about skepticism on a bunch of stuff, right? Bigfoot, aliens, whether the earth is flat, whatever. And Smiles is a good guest to talk about some of that other stuff. And Smiles is, in fact, the founder and president of an organization called Anomaly Archives. And Smiles, why don't you tell us a little bit about what that organization is?
All right. Well, thank you for having me again. So the Anomaly Archives is a 501c3 nonprofit that I founded in 2003. Its official IRS name is Scientific Anomaly Institute. Our main mission and goals are preservation of anomalous materials as well as public education. So the preservation aspect of that is that we have an archive, an ever-growing archive of books and materials on these subjects of the anomalous, whether it be the nature of human consciousness, parapsychology, other quote-unquote paranormal phenomena, ESP, psychic phenomena, or psychic remote viewing, all the way to out-of-body experiences and meditation and biofeedback, as well as the aforementioned cryptozoological critters, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, and the host of other things. And, of course, the more mundane, like the ivory bill woodpecker, the coelacanth, and things that are presumed extinct or presumed never to have existed. But of course, my big areas of interest are parapsychology and UFOs. I've been fascinated by UFOs and psychic phenomena all my life, but also just more the things that we have contact with every day, dreams. There's, to my mind, nothing more paranormal than the dream state that we all experience on a daily and nightly basis. The other aspect of the organization, public education. So we have free and pay events open to the public when we're able to, that cater to these different subjects. So we have authors and researchers and experiencers who've had strange encounters or are investigating these types of phenomena, or are deep researchers, whether it be historical research or anthropological research or more, physical hard science type of research. We try to have speakers on all these different subjects. And so I founded it in 2003 with the first donated collection of about 1,000 books that was from my own collection, as well as the collection of another local Austin seeker who was the publisher of a zine called Crash Collusion. He was a really wonderful guy named Wes Nations, who went on to other fields of interest and then the great beyond. But with the first founding 1,000 books, we've grown to over 7,000 books now, and thousands of periodicals dealing with these subject matters, but not just like popular literature, but also the research materials of actual researchers or experiencers. So, for example, we have some of the papers and research materials of people who investigated Roswell and psychic remote viewing, as well as who used to edit journals such as the MUFON UFO Journal, what used to be the largest civilian UFO research organization in the world, MUFON, MUFON, not MOOFON, Mutual UFO Network, which used to be headquartered right here in Seguin, Texas. I'm here in Austin, but here in Texas, and that's the main overview, but there's a lot more. We've got a lot of strange, weird paracultural artifacts. People know that I'm interested in these subjects, so they're endlessly giving me little trinkets that are, Bigfoot figurines or alien figurines. I don't ask for this stuff, but they just give it to me.
It just comes.
Yeah,
no, that's great. We first started talking a couple months ago, and of course, because of the pandemic and stuff, we haven't been able to make anything happen in person, but I want to come see this archive in person. I'll be honest. I want to see all of what you got, because you talked about some of the materials in there that are, you just gave a brief overview, but in our other conversations, you've mentioned some stuff that's just, I don't know, like I kind of want to see for myself. Obviously, you have a lot of literature published from people from, let's say, various levels of credibility, right?
Yes,
I mean, like
yes.
you kind of got it all, and
Yeah.
like, and that's what it's been interesting to talk with you, because you are I see yourself, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're running this archive. You yourself don't necessarily believe in every single thing that goes in that archive, or think that it's valid, but you think it's fascinating enough, or at least it just, weird enough to that it goes in that collection, right?
Yeah. No, actually, I do
Yeah.
believe everything, even the
Oh man.
contradictory theories. In one paradigm, reality or another, I
I
believe all
guess
these things.
so. Right.
But yeah, no, I should say the views expressed by this guy here do not necessarily reflect that
Yeah.
of the organization, though I will occasionally speak on behalf of the organization. And as such, yes, we do not espouse any particular belief about these phenomena. We, think that the people can make their own decisions and conclusions, and so our public education efforts are just more in line with, here's what this person's research has led them to believe. And here are all these interesting areas of exploration that you can do, and you can come to your own conclusion. I am interested in having some subject matter experts, these different researchers give their feelings of what they believe is the truth on these different subjects, and we do that in the form of having these events. But yeah, I've grown to be very much more skeptical of these various phenomena over the years. I grew up firmly believing in the existence of extraterrestrials, all the classic UFO contact cases and abduction cases and government cover-ups, or as I like to say, crash saucers and pickled aliens, the whole Roswell thing. I totally used to believe in that wholeheartedly. I do not think that is the most likely explanation at this point for that particular subject, as far as the what happened in Roswell in 1947. But like most of these areas, I think one can really you can find a hypothesis that fits most of the data, but not all of the data.
Sure.
And that's why I tend towards I would say multiplicity of interpretations. Looking at everything from through different lenses to try to come up with the different possibilities. It's been a long, strange journey, as they say.
Yeah, for sure. When I was a kid, I used to watch all the garbage that they put on the History Channel when it came to all the UFO stuff and the Bigfoot stuff and the ghost stuff. Like, I kind of like, I don't know if I ever fully believed it, but I was definitely more like, oh man, but what if, now, especially since doing a show like this one, it's like, man, I hear all kinds of stuff, and I just tend to have that naturalist view for pretty much anything that I hear. And it's not that I ever have a perfect explanation for everything that I ever come across, but more often than not, it seems that something that can be explained through naturalist causes, it seems to be the most probable to me. So like, is there anything, I mean, do you feel the same way with a lot of the stuff you encounter? Do you think that there's something beyond what we can immediately observe?
I do. And I would say, I do not, I in elementary school was probably the earliest I ever actually touted myself as an atheist, and I quickly learned that you don't do that in public school.
Sure.
You're gonna get bullied more than you might already for every other reason that bullying happens in schools. And so, and over time, though, as I realized that I had more of I would say an animistic appreciation of the nature of reality. And so I've the more one explores these phenomena, you either end up locked into a belief system that really blinds you from any other possibilities, and it just becomes a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, or you keep your mind open. And I really think that's the important thing, though, as others have said, not so open that your brains fall out.
Sure.
But I think there's plenty of things that I believe, and that's why I'm really interested to be on your show, because I think it's important to explore why we believe these things. And I will fully admit that I cannot support scientifically and rationally every belief that I have, but I would say, like, just as a broad brush approach to this, when it comes to like UFOs, I believe that there is a preponderance of evidence that humans have been engaging with something that seems like a quote unquote alien other. Now, and when I say alien, I just mean that in the broadest sense. I do not mean extraterrestrial. I grew up believing in the idea of extraterrestrials, and I still think it's highly probable because, I dread the idea that we are the only quote unquote intelligent life in the universe. I think that would be a tragic reality of epic proportions. But I do suspect that there's something at the heart of the UFO phenomena that either is there's a whole range, and I won't go into them now, but there's a whole range of possibilities that I think are much more interesting and probable than simple extraterrestrials or interdimensionals, as is popular now. Whereas with things like cryptozoological critters, cryptids, as they're called for shorthand. Bigfoot. I've been on explorations in East Texas. I've looked for these things, had some weird experiences out there, and I've long suspected that if there is what I sort of believe, the possibility of a undiscovered North American primate, that discovery could very well happen here in Texas. People don't tend to think of Texas as being the climate for that kind of critter. They tend to think of the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
But there's actually, I believe, more forest in Texas than in California. But that's a whole other area. And there's definitely obvious reasons to not think that that's likely or possible. And then when it comes to things like psychic phenomena, I do believe that there's good parapsychological evidence that human senses go beyond what we traditionally believe to be possible. But yeah, those are each different avenues that you may want to go down.
Yeah. So this is what happens when I do this show, Smiles. It's like I'm playing an RPG sometimes with guests and callers, where I'm given a bunch of choices, and it's like I can only really focus my efforts on one of these things. And you just gave me three very this is like Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle right now. This is the big three. I don't even know which one to start with, but we don't talk enough about like the Bigfoot stuff. I'll be honest. Yeah, I wish we talked about it more. The cryptid stuff. I mean, Bigfoot's just one of like many cryptid stuff I wish people talked more on this show. But like, I did study a little bit of anthropology in college. I've talked about this before. And like one thing that was drilled into me was like, yeah, we've never had like North American primates, ever, even in both of the Americas. It's always been what they call like New World monkeys and stuff, right? Which are, monkeys are being different from apes. So we never had like apes over here except for us, of course, right? So whenever people talk to me about, the kinds of evidence and stuff that a Bigfoot would be here, or a kind of Bigfoot-like entity, whatever you would call it, I just wonder, like, but like, what about everything that anthropologists have been saying for years now about like what we know about primates? Obviously, now what's interesting is we discover new ancient primates like every other year. Like, it's crazy how many new species of apes we've discovered just in the past decade. It's really quite interesting. But that they've all been over in Africa and Europe and all these other places. We never seen it over here. So I do wonder. I do wonder what people mean when they say that.
Yeah. And, when I say I believe these things, again, it's not something that really affects my everyday life. It's not like I'm going to, go picket the Capitol building to demand, that whatever it is that people are seeing be classified as an endangered species. Though I've met people that's kind of their hope that they're like, well, they believe it's real, either through their own experiences or their research into these subject areas. But it's I'm pretty open about this. It's not something that's going to destroy my life, and I will freely admit that all of these things are mysteries, and everybody loves a mystery. And
sure.
It's not that I don't want the mystery to be solved. I do. I think it would be great to finally definitively answer so many of these questions, though a lot of them I think are so difficult that it may not be that simple. But yeah, cryptozoology, particularly the Bigfoot thing, it's weird. The best arguments against it I regularly hear are that there's not the there's not enough biodiversity to support a population of any significant size, and that has a lot of merit. And then where's the bodies? Where are the bodies? But
Sure.
as one of our former board members was very active in one of the couple of different active groups here in Texas, there used to be like 2 or 3 different Texas Bigfoot conferences on a yearly basis, and one was the
oh man, hold on, I gotta sign up for this. When is this happening? I guess COVID, not right now.
Well,
I gotta
no,
go.
actually they held it last year
Truth
in
Wanted Live
Jefferson.
Bigfoot Conference 2022, baby.
You should go. I'm telling you,
I'm down. I might have the biggest feet there. I'm a pretty big guy. I don't know. We'll see.
There's a couple of different ones. One of them was organized. That's no longer being run by Chester Moore Jr. out in East Texas. He lives in the Orange, Texas area. He is an outdoorsman. He is a wildlife and nature enthusiast. He writes for like Fish and Game and magazines like that. He's lived his life in the Big Thicket out in East Texas, which is the piney woods, this incredibly amazing. I mean, if people have never been out to East Texas and gone deep into this, you really you can't understand just how
slight tangent here. Texas has some of the craziest diversity of, I think people see in the movies, I don't know what they think when they think of Texas. Maybe they either think of plains, or there's a bunch of old cowboy movies that say that they're in Texas, but they're like have mountains and stuff. We don't really have all that, but we do have mountains. We got plains, we got forests, we got deserts, all kinds of stuff. In East Texas, I kind of like, now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of agree with you. If there's a Bigfoot in the US, it kind of would be in East Texas. Like they got some weird stuff out there. There's some nasty looking people that you might mix up with Bigfoot too.
I don't want to disparage our East Texan brothers and sisters and non-binaries, but yeah, it really you really have to go out there and experience this. In 2005, the Anomaly Archives had our I guess it was our second big event, or first big event. It was actually sponsored by a now deceased Bigfoot researcher named Rob Riggs. He sponsored our event, and it was called the Texas Ghost Lights Mini Conference. And we had, this is 2005, we had speakers from around the country and around the world. A famous Earth Lights researcher from England named Paul Devereaux came over. It was called, why am I bringing this up in the context of Bigfoot? Because it goes to this diversity of climate that you described, where, we have ghost light phenomena from one side of the border of our state to the other side. We've got the Marfa lights out in this desert region. So you've got this one type of geology and climate, and this recurring light phenomena, which, yes, people misidentify car lights, but the lights predate the vehicular traffic. And then in East Texas, you've got the Ghost Road, Bragg Road, this long straight track, which is common feature, I think, in some of these cases, which again gives you the sense of like, okay, it's a long straight road with humps, and so like car lights are going to disappear and appear and reappear. Sure. But it's more swampy. So you've got this desert and you've got swamp. In both cases, you've got this seeming long-term recurring luminous phenomena. This fellow Rob Riggs published a really good book I highly recommend called In the Big Thicket. I think that's the title. I'm probably misremembering, but he went into great detail about all these different aspects that informed his perspective, which he was one of the more, he was a paranormal Bigfoot kind of guy. He felt that the evidence indicated that there had to be some other component here besides just an undiscovered primate. And so he would go out in the field and he would research, he would do his own investigations. He had his own experiences, and he would interview all these other outdoorsmen and people who'd had encounters with Bigfoot. And of course, they almost universally, we called them blood and gutters, just like with the extraterrestrial hypothesis. You've got your nuts and bolts ufologists, and you've got your interdimensional enthusiasts. There's the people who are like, no, it's a blood and gut, it's a physical creature, and don't talk to me about paranormal weird stuff. But then if you kind of just keep being friends with them and get maybe a drink in them, they'll open up about some weird stuff.
Spiritual Bigfoot smiles. Is that what you're telling me?
There are some very metaphysically oriented, spiritually oriented Bigfoot.
Metaphysical Bigfoot
Yeah.
Smiles.
Yeah.
Metaphysical Bigfoot is
interdimensional
my
Bigfoot.
new Xbox Live gamer tag. Smiles? That's so good.
So
I love it.
So Rob helped organize this great event. We had a number of different people. We had actually part of the Anomaly Archives collection is the donated books from this researcher out in West Texas, and I'm blanking on his name right now. James Bunnell, Bunnell, I think. James Bunnell. He set up a number of sensor and camera installations out in the Marfa area to try to record the Marfa lights. He came to a conclusion that more or less it's some kind of natural phenomena. That's obviously one of the main hypotheses. But he spoke at the conference. We had famous UFO paranormal writer Nick Redfern, who lives up in Arlington. He's a Brit who just turns out great books on all these different subjects. He's a journalist. He doesn't necessarily subscribe to any of these hypotheses. He just writes the books, does great stuff. And then, like I said, Paul Devereaux came over, and Rob, who organized it, also gave a presentation. And then afterwards, this all was on my birthday weekend, and we went out to East Texas and went out into the big thicket, and somewhere out there's footage of me communing with a light down the road that I'm sure I look like a complete idiot because I was like, I don't know what I mean. I was like, oh, this is really weird. And then I was like, no, it's car lights. And then I'm like, no, this is really weird. I just kept it in my usual way, going back and forth between like, is this something significant or is this something mundane? And some other people who were out there with us had some very strange experiences, but that was just one of a couple of times that Rob and I went out into the big thicket. And one of those other times was with Chester Moore, who I said organized that other conference.
I'd love to do something like that sometime. I want to get out in the woods and just look for a Bigfoot, man.
Yeah,
sounds like a good weekend.
Yeah, no, that's a fun. I mean, hey, what do you need an excuse to get out into nature? Come on.
Well, here's what I want to know, because and maybe this will be a last question before we get to calls and stuff. But we can talk more a bit afterwards if we want. But like this idea of like independent research, okay, like. I struggle with this because I think people doing their own research on stuff is kind of how we have a lot of real problems in our society right now when it comes to like misinformation about the virus and the vaccines, and just like election fraud, conspiracy stuff, like all kinds of stuff that I think is really harmful to us as a society. And of course, but when you look at like the history of science, it used to be like a bunch of smart dudes in small locales, not necessarily universities, although that was around in different contexts. Like a lot of just dudes doing their own independent research gave us a lot of the stuff we have today. But of course, now we also have those institutional resources to do those kind of research, private organizations doing that kind of research. And then, over here you have people doing the independent stuff. And I tell you, Smiles, as a guy who has an email that says truth@atheist-community.org. Okay. I get emails of people's research. Okay. And I'm using research in quotes because it's some guy's blog that they wrote about how light isn't actually real or something, like, or somehow we can understand the universe through complicated geometry. Okay. It's like that kind of stuff. And like, that doesn't impress me. I'll be honest. That doesn't do a whole lot for me. So I wonder, like, what's your take on this? Because and on some level, I'm like, yes, this human spirit is to know things. And sometimes you just want to do it yourself without the red tape. I get it. But at the same time, isn't the peer review process on a university level also like super important to like knowing a lot of, especially when it comes to health stuff? I mean, I'd rather it go through the rigorous processes if we're talking about new medicines. I mean, I don't know about zoological research. I'm assuming we'd want to hold to some standards as well. So what do you think?
Well, it's an excellent question. And I have friends who are just like, we should abandon all large scale research organizations when it comes to like UFO research and so forth, because they haven't accomplished anything. And others, I think I've seen plenty of examples of people doing what I would consider good research. I mean, there's always the possibility of some flaws in their data collection, or more likely their interpretation, or their final conclusions. But and I think obviously we have moved into a time where science is on the ropes, kind of.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, belief in science or faith in science is on the ropes.
Sure.
And I mean, it's certainly true that even quote unquote, accredited scientists who, were respectable and respected sometimes get caught faking data or faking aspects of their research. These are all things that you got to guard against. And I don't have the answers to any of these questions or discussions, but I think it's better. I think we've got more tools at our disposal now as individuals than any other people in before us. However, it is increasingly difficult to navigate all the wealth of information and weed wheat from chaff and that misinformation and disinformation, because there is active disinfo campaigns going on. Some are just Discordians, if you know what that is, or people who would be just the classic troll who are just literally just trying to get a reaction or an emotional rise out of people. And then there's obviously literal psychological warfare being waged all the time. And often by people who think they're actually doing the right thing, and not necessarily for some political reason. But so one of the things I was privileged to be a part of was a group called the RSRG, the Roswell Slides Research Group. Back in 2015, there was a media campaign being mounted by people that were not really from the paranormal or UFO communities to create a documentary about some mysterious slides that they discovered that showed a purported alien body. And there's a lot of backstory to this, and you can find out more about it by searching. And the Anomaly archives, I compiled a page where I put together a whole bunch of links about this long saga. But a group of skeptics, most of whom do not hold any of the interest level or beliefs in UFOs that I do, who are actually more traditional hardcore skeptics, got together and invited me in. And so I was kind of like the token believer. And I think one person referred to me as their conscience. And this was an example of a kind of a crowdsourcing research effort. I mean, it was insular in so much as we were in a private Facebook group. But the effort was to try to figure out what the nature of the slides that were being alleged to be aliens were. And from the beginning, it seemed pretty obvious. But without going into all that, I bring that up to use it as an example of, well, here are a bunch of lay people who each have their own areas of expertise. Some might be video editors, some might be, former comic book store operators, and a few of us, have lifetimes of interest and reading about the UFO phenomena. And but none of us was like an expert. I mean, there were some people in there who had like a background in anatomy, so that became useful when trying to look at the photograph, the images that were being leaked out of this alleged alien body. Long story short, it was the mummified remains of a Native American child. It was, and this was being touted and as the breakthrough for the Roswell case. And there was a massive event held in Mexico City on May 5th. Where it was like a 50,000 person auditorium, and they had thousands of people there who'd paid to see it, and they were paying. You could pay to see it streamed. So this was a money making operation by a famous Mexico City journalist, Jaime Maussan, who in years past had promulgated just about every ridiculous story and video and hoax you can imagine. Not the kind of person who would ever be at the heart of revealing such a possibly momentous discovery. But interesting feedback.
Nope, that's probably maybe coming from my mic. I don't know. I'm going to mute it for now.
Okay. So anyway, I'm not sure where that. But so this group of people came together and we're able to, once we got access to a decent enough image, we're able to do in like 2 days what hadn't been accomplished in 3 years by this group that was looking to make money off of this. It wasn't a hoax, but it certainly had some qualities of that. So I think, I can't, I'm not going to damn, individuals who, are doing research that is, I mean, yeah, I get the same kind of emails that you describe, like, somebody's got the secret of the universe or some big revelation, and you try to read through it and you're just like, this is just somebody who has seriously too much time on their hands or possibly a mental issue.
Yeah, that's what I worry about when we talk about this stuff. Hopefully, guys, you're not picking up on this sound. Sorry, different environment. Might be running into some technical difficulties. I'm gonna adjust the gain and see if that does anything. The crew will be working with me as we're doing this, but yeah, like that's what I worry about too with this stuff too, because like as fun as this stuff can be, at the end of the day, there's always somebody looking for an opportunity to make money off of gullible people, unfortunately. And
I mean, we've all seen those, videos of UFOs that get so much media attention, and like anybody with a lick of sense usually can look at them and go, yeah, I mean, sometimes they are compelling, but then if you really stop and just step back and think about it, or if somebody just says the right word to you and you suddenly, it's like you reframe your perspective and you're like, oh, that's a blimp. And I didn't see that before. Or, oh, that's, those night parachuters with flares on their ankles, or there's so many things now, that both can be very mundane, and that's why it's a UFO. You're not familiar with these things seen in the sky, and suddenly it looks weird, and so whoa, alien.
Right. Well, the good thing is, Smiles, we're on Truth Wanted. We want to know the truth, and we want to know what you guys think is true. So we got to get to some calls right about now. But before we do that, we should thank our patron of the week. Folks, last week I told you, hey, we ran out of people to talk about for patron of the week, and some of you guys donated. So we have more patrons to shout out. So thank you guys for doing that. We could definitely use more, though. It takes a lot to run this show. For example, I just had to get a new Ethernet cable today because I realized I left my other Ethernet cable at my other apartment. And so I had to get another one. And so that stuff costs money. And that stuff is paid for by patrons like you for paying for my mistakes in making this show happen. So thank you guys for helping donate the show. Remember, all the proceeds goes towards making this show happen. I personally don't receive any of it. And most of the people who work on the show are also volunteers as well. So this week's patron of the week, want to give a shout out to Anthony Guthrie. Not sure how to pronounce the name, but Anthony, thank you so much for donating. And again, folks, if you want to donate as well, you can do that on patreon.com/truthwanted. I really appreciate everybody that helps make this show happen. It's really fun doing this. Yeah, it's really fun talking to Smiles so far. And now you guys get to talk to Smiles and me, because we're going to get to some calls. You ready, Smiles?
Oh, yeah.